Hey, welcome once again to Rise of the GM, where today we're going to be talking about a mutation mystery. We've got a deluded crime lord we're going to meet, and in the middle, we're going to talk about facilitating summoned creatures right here on Rise of the GM. Hey, Adam, here we are again. We are at the week before Thanksgiving. I think last year we did a little Thanksgiving special because I remember coming up with like a mutated turkeys and stuff like that.
Hello, Evan.
And, we've got that picture somewhere of that big
I
bird
need to bring that back because
gonna throw that out next week. By the way, just before I forget, all of you, next week we are actually not having a show because of all the Thanksgiving travels, and we know you're going to be giving thanks for not having to sit and listen to us. Kidding, you're going to be sad.
Yeah.
But anyway, we do hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. But before we get to that, we have some stuff going on here today about summoned creatures. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So.
I hope
so. How are things in Terre Haute today? I heard you were your own grandpa today. Is that right?
I was multiple times a grandpa this week for my kids for Grandparents' Day.
Grandpa for his kids because their grandparents couldn't be there.
Couldn't make it this week, so went and did that. That was fun. It was super fun, but a different kind of thing. And I'm guessing, Matthew, we're in the same kind of weather line. We have snow right now. I'm looking at
snowing.
Yeah, it's had some a little bit this morning, and it kicked back up now. So we have some.
I love it. Ours is pretty heavy out there. I don't think we have anything on the ground, but it's like in the air, all over and blowing around. It looks very Christmassy.
Yeah, you guys are usually like a couple hours ahead of us on weather, and we have a river. The river is right here, and it's like weird, and I want to like study it because I'm positive that it affects something, but sometimes like a storm will come in and then it just like separates around our city that you guys got. But I think we're getting the same kind of stuff today. So see, but yeah. How's it going your way?
It's good. It is good. I was going to say something. Oh, I was gonna comment about you going as a grandpa for your boys.
Oh yeah.
And if that would have been my kids, I would have gone full grandpa character. I'd have been talking like this the whole time.
I threatened that. I was like, I'm gonna get a white wig and a cane and be like, back in my day.
Like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins when he was the old guy.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the names now.
The banker guy.
Yep.
I was thinking, like,
feed the birds and what have you got? Fat birds. Right.
Does that have the same kind of? So my mind went to the first Willy Wonka when he comes out like at the very beginning and he's like and then he like does the backflip or the front flip thing and like pops up and he's like, is there like a similar? He's still old, but does he get like more vibrant at the end of?
Well, no, he starts to slide with his cane, and they help lift him back up. At the end, he floats up.
He floats. Yeah, that's right.
And they're trying to Father, he died laughing. So,
that's good times. Yeah, I threatened that. But
you didn't know you were going to be getting to do some Mary Poppins reliving here today on Rise of the GM, did you? All right. Well, we're going to get into our encounter starter. I believe Adam is going to be reading this for us today, and it is a good one. What do we got, Adam?
Yeah. Hey, I want to. Evan's in the chat, and Evan hooked me up yesterday. It is on our Instagram story right now. I may try to put it somewhere else that'll be longer, even though because I think it's like a 19-day thing. But Evan sent me a message, and there's a bundle of all of these Gnome Stew books that's like on a sale right now through. It's not Humble Bundle. I'm trying to pull it up now.
Drive Through RPG.
No, it's man, I should have had this ready.
Piezo?
But no. Anyway, if you go to our stories, I have it, but it's got the 5 books, so it's like masks. That bundle of holding. Thank you, Evan, for hooking me up there.
So it has mask, encounter, focus,
focal point,
focal point.
Yeah.
Not improvisation. I have all of these because I bought them all once.
It's $9.95 right now, which I feel like it's like
really
for all of them.
That is good. Yeah,
like a really good. It's the Gnome Gnome Stew, Bundle of Holding. Things are just not moving fast as I'm trying to pull this up, so it's not going well. But yeah, those are in there, and we've got a link on our story, so you can go there and check it out. But definitely worth looking at. Never Unprepared and Odyssey. And actually Unframed. So there's 6. Looks like 6 of them.
Yes. And I have all of those, and I can attest all of them are good. I read all of them, and when I was like first starting my GM stuff, I was reading through them, and I'm like, this is such good stuff. And sometimes I've forgotten, and I go back and read it, and I'm like, oh, this is such good stuff again. So
yeah, I started Focal Point last year. I haven't continued because I kind of got distracted with some other things, but that's one I want to look into more too, because the masks and the Eureka have been like super helpful. It's cool to like talk through them this way, but those have helped spur things on in our games, but in my games. But that Focal Point had some just like really good like GM philosophy things that I really appreciate.
Yeah,
so
Never Unprepared and I can't remember what Odyssey was exactly. Never Unprepared was a good one. I think that's the one about being able to improv as a GM and tips and tricks and stuff for that.
Yeah, there's one that's session prep, one that's improv.
Maybe that's Never Unprepared is session prep. I don't
know. Yeah, that's what it is. Odyssey is about campaign management, so I'm not sure what that exactly would fall under, but yeah. So yeah, having said that though, yeah, so check those out if you're interested in this stuff. But this is so from the Eureka book that we're talking about here called Letting Sleeping Giants Lie. So in an isolated hamlet, villagers begin succumbing to a strange disease. At first, it's like a flu or a seasonal allergy, but soon warts and other growths appear and become monstrous mutations. The villagers send a representative to seek aid from the local government, only to be turned away because of their hideous appearance. The representative may approach the PCs directly, they may hear tales of the village, or they may encounter the village along their journeys, seemingly stepping into a polite society of monstrous creatures. Life goes on like normal, except the changed appearances and adaptations of the villagers. Some blame the ancient abandoned castle up on the hill. Observant PCs or villagers may notice that fish in the river grow multiple legs or have some animals with human faces. The crops that are nearest to the river grow to enormous sizes, and the river runs near the castle, leading people to believe that it's the source of the troubles. While in the village, the PCs see one of the villagers undergo a rapid transformation, becoming a powerful monster. The mutated villager attacks anyone in sight and doesn't stop until killed. This makes the other villagers fearful for what will happen next to them. Signs of mutation get stronger closer to the castle. Plants sprout up instantly, blocking the PC's way. Many hostile mutated creatures attack the party, and strange voices talk to them from out of thin air. A trip to the castle should feel like being in a fairy tale. The castle shows signs of great age and wear, but it is intact. From deep inside, what sounds like snoring can be heard. Here, a malevolent, incorporeal shadow creature stands before a sleeping giant. Nearby is an overturned jug, its glowing water flowing endlessly into the river. The shadow creature explains that the giant lost a drinking contest, which the shadow engineered. It appears frustrated, but it won't say more until it knows the PC's intentions. The shadow creature can't touch the liquid itself, but it wants the liquid, and it knows about the village. It plans to use the mutated villagers as its personal army. The PCs must defeat the shadow, which they can do by waking the giant, dousing the shadow with the liquid, or through other means as you see fit. If the giant is awakened, he'll defeat the shadow and cure the townsfolk, apologizing for the trouble that he unwittingly caused. He may reveal a treasure hidden in the castle as a reward. So that's Letting Sleeping Giants Lie.
So you got yourself a nice giant who would apologize. But all of this stuff is happening. And it starts off with just all of this mutation. And at first, everybody seems very polite. I think it said you step into a very polite, monstrous society. But at some point, one goes like berserk and just is killing everybody. And that reminded me very much of Red Markets when, what is that when you...
like the like a vector going
Vector, yeah, like you know
or a vector,
that
yeah.
you're doing it and you can't stop it, and you're apologizing while
Yep.
you're like destroying those closest to you. And
Yeah.
uh, so
For sure.
that
Yeah.
starts to happen. Maybe you see the one, but then it looks like maybe more are going to be going that way. So
Hmm.
it becomes time sensitive, right?
Yeah.
And then you go, and it talks about on the way you face some stuff, and it should seem very fairy tale like. I think as a GM, one thing I would do as I'm planning that is I would have two examples of each of those things. I have two examples of things that come to fight you, mutated monsters, whatever, mutated things that are now monsters. Two examples of the voices and what they're, things
Okay.
that you
Yeah.
would say to your party,
Right.
maybe even a couple more since it's just voices, but things that might make them think this is important or whatever, as they are just basically trying to get through. And then maybe a couple of just things that grow really quick and are obstacles
Yeah. Right.
of some sort. And if you could have two of each of those just kind of in your back pocket to pull out, I think it would feel very random. They wouldn't know you only had two
Yeah.
of each.
Right.
Or I guess if you wanted to have three of each, you could, but you don't want to like make it so much that it becomes like drug out on the way.
Right.
And then they get there, and of course, there's this incorporeal spirit, whatever, there with the giant and that liquid, and you have to be ready for obviously if you have a container of endless liquid that's doing something, somebody's going to want it in the party. They're going to be like trying to figure out how they can get it, but obviously it's a pretty bad thing,
Right.
and so. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. This one would take some thinking on your part as the GM. If you decided to use this, you'd have to make some decisions about like
Right.
what exactly is that last fight going to look like,
Mm-hmm.
and what is going to happen with this liquid at the end, and
Yeah.
the giant and the people. Obviously, the people didn't know there was a giant. They just know there's a castle up there. Don't know why they would have never known that living within sight of it this whole time. But yeah. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. Yeah. I like the fairy tale aspect that it brings in. I think that's always a fun thing, and I think I tend to enjoy that with like just kind of basic giants. Like for that does like work for me, you know. I think like even which I think was part of the Eureka stuff, or like you had expanded from that, but like your game, that the floating island that even had, or floating castle that had the giant in it, and multiple things like that. There was, even though like our game is not necessarily like fairy tale, it's not that necessarily that meant it took that on with still having like the epicness of like what we're doing. And I like that. I like that it like just changes the tone a little bit when you can add those things. So I'm a fan of that. I think if anybody starts asking like why, some of it's kind of weird, and in the way that these things are, especially think about like the voices out of thin air seemed like a kind of strange thing, but maybe people have been turned invisible by this stuff, or what that is. That was a little strange, but I do like the various pieces of that as they get closer to the castle. Things are happening.
I think I would make it insects that have drank water,
Mm.
and now they're incredibly intelligent mosquitoes and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
flying
yeah.
around, and they're like, "I believe you should turn back." You don't know what's going on, but really it's just this little mosquito
Yeah, yeah.
that's like landing near your
In your ear.
then it sticks you and you start mutating.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely want to. I was thinking about like this being either, I like this as a one and done kind of situation, or I'd want to expand it out more. And like if it was a one and done, I think you'd have to push the hamlet time a little quicker, of like this
Mm.
stuff kind of one after another, you're experiencing these things, then it kind of pushes you up into the castle area. If you expand it out more, I think I'd want, and which is probably the way I would want to go, is more develop it like, okay, like why, asking that why question again, like why did the shadow, okay, it wanted it for the army, but is there like more to this? and maybe that's something that's bigger that this, if it's a campaign, could like lean into more. So developing that out, or maybe this shadow is like a forerunner of something else coming, and this was part of this grand plan. It doesn't have to go that far, but I'd want to like develop that stuff a little more instead of just kind of leaving it as like oh yeah, that was just, it happened for a reason. But I like this a lot. That there was a line about the polite society of like monstrous creatures or something like that I really thought was evoking, like for that. And I like that idea of like they walk into this place and it's just like you have like your cackles kind of come up, and then it's like, no, everyone's just like, oh, hello. Would you like to buy some apples? Dude who has an arm sticking out of his head, it's like, this is like really weird, but that's like a whole different
Yeah.
situation that
Having
I find
fun
interesting.
thinking of what those mutations look
Mhm.
like and what the interactions are going to be
Yeah.
and how they're going to be nice. And then I think quickly, somebody saying, it's not my favorite. I don't like this arm sticking out of my head, but so far it's not been too bad.
Yeah.
Right as somebody then like goes berserk and starts killing everybody. And
Yeah.
that puts the time pressure on to get out of the hamlet
Yeah,
and
yeah.
figure out what's going on. I probably wouldn't make it very long either. It would be like
Yeah.
the oddity of stepping into this place with all these
Right.
nice people until this crazy thing happens. And then it's like people start to tell their theories of what they think is happening.
Yeah, yeah.
You have some stuff on the way. And then at
Yeah.
the end, I would probably myself, I'd make this a one off, but I would want to tie it in. Anytime I drop an encounter in, I want to tie it to what's already happening. And so you have to think about like, okay, where are my people coming from? And then like, how could this further into the story that I'm already telling? And so that would influence, so if we were in the Jade Mask and you drop this in, then this shadow and this, is probably going to have something to do with something we've already faced or are going to be going to as far as the ley lines and stuff. If it's in the dormant mind, it would probably have something to do with what you guys have been trying to do. Again, whatever campaign you're in, you would then tailor it.
Yeah, for sure. I think about when that person goes monster and attacks people, the visual I have in my head is the old Halo, like the guys being puppeted by the flood that like just like running like crazy. Like that's like the thing I have like in my head and with that. So yeah, I think it can be pretty fun. But yeah, it's a good one.
There you go. So mutation mystery, maybe something you can use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, today, our main topic, last time we talked about what?
Last time was the NPCs joining the party.
Yeah. So when you have NPCs that are, they come in because of the story and they join the party, how do you as a GM deal with the fact that NPCs are now traveling with and maybe even fighting with whatever your party? That's one aspect of people that are not your player characters.
Yeah.
We have another one here today, and it is those summoned creatures. So if you have a summoner, obviously he's going to be summoning lots of people.
Yeah.
It can happen in some other ways, but most likely somebody is one who summons.
Yeah.
How do you bring in and facilitate summoned creatures as you're dealing with your party? And that's what today's all about.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right into that, Adam.
Right. Yeah. The thing I find like compelling or compels me to want to like talk about this is I think that so I always have loved the idea of like summoning. I think it's like a really interesting thing. I like, if I didn't say last time, it was like the big realization is I love NPCs in the party. I love summon creatures. I love animal companions, which we're going to talk about next time, and familiars if you're a magic user, or like cohorts. I'm down for all that. I want the baggage train. Like that's what has been established at this point. So that's just, everybody needs to know it. That's where I'm coming from. But I also I know that there's like a pretty strong like pushback against that. I think like typically GMs are like, oh gosh, summon creatures again. Like if you jump on any forum about like summoning, the like attitude that I see almost across the board is like, nah, I don't let them summon, or I only let them summon one creature, or like these kind of things, and they're typically a little more negative towards that, and that there's good reasons, because the pace of the game can like suffer greatly if you summon 12 level 1/8 mosquitoes to attack this person. You're rolling all of it's like this. Okay, there has to be a better way. So I think that's like where that comes from, is specifically the bogging down of combat. It can like slow that down quite a bit. But I think there's got to be a middle place of like, how could this be done in a good way that's fun? A person who like wants to put intentionality into a character that does this. I don't want that person to get like handicapped because I don't like that we're slow, kind of thing. And so I think there's got to be some kind of middle ground with that. So that's kind of the heart of like, I want to have this conversation a little bit, talk maybe some ideas, ask some questions, because I think there's a way that summoners could be done well without it necessarily having to be this like horrible slog that we go through. So that's kind of the idea. Any like rebuttal on that to begin with?
No, I think whenever the idea of summoning, or I'm trying to think of, I guess familiar, the stuff we're covering next week might be a little different, but for summoning, I really like to, as a GM, decide that it's not just up to them and a line in the rule book that says, can summon this many creatures, which is what most people play it as. And it can become a huge slog. One, I'm all for making sure that it does not become a huge slog. And so I, as a GM, I'm going to step in some way. If they summon 1 or 2 creatures, I might let them, and we're going to talk about like how that works. Does it happen, that they have to command them every time? Is it part of their turn? Are they, we'll talk about that here in a second.
Yeah, right.
This idea of how the command happens. But I might let them if it's 1 or 2. If it's a swarm, I may allow them at first to do something like, okay, you have all these 1/8 inch, or 1/8 character level mosquitoes. You're going to roll all of them as a big bundle.
Right.
But they have to, hit first, and they're probably not going to hit every time. That could start to get slow. Who's to say that my, main baddie then doesn't do something that puffs out this thing that just kills all the mosquitoes?
Yeah.
If I'm getting tired of all the mosquitoes, not ever hitting, and then yet we're rolling 16 times to see if they hit. And then, 2 of them do damage, and we roll those 4 of them, but the damage is so little that it never gets past the damage reduction. And so basically you just took 5 minutes of time every round.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow that as a GM. I'm going to find a way to get rid of that. But I think it really does come to start off, you have to think, okay, what's the, as you're doing, summon creatures, what's the purpose of this? Okay. If it's just that the person wants to be more powerful and they're using it as a form of, let's just say you could substitute it for gun. Okay. I substitute 5 guns. Basically, I'm going to take 5 extra shots at you, and that's all they are. Well, that's not very exciting, and not something that, especially as you go further in the campaign, it's just going to become monotonous. I would like to bring in more of a narrative role there. And think about like, okay, how does this tie, how does this person then begin to tie creatures to this story? Is it just, how do I show their personal growth as they, obviously as they grow, they're going to summon different and greater things. So maybe I have to put up with a few like junk swarms and stupid things at the beginning. But as they get bigger, I want to see that growing. And that can be something I, as a GM, play into, like, okay, how am I going to make this? Obviously they have a progression chart that they can see. They know where it's going to go, but like I can influence that. And then I have to, one thing I'm going to do is hopefully help them realize that it does not just have to be combat. So typically when people think of summoning things, they're like, okay, when I get into a battle, I'm going to summon this, and it's going to fight for me. But there are all kinds of things you can do with summoned creatures. There can be exploration, there can be problem solving, there can be, a thematic flavor of stuff that they summon throughout social interactions, or whenever they first come into a town, something they do every time that, like, again, let that kind of narrative part be more than just combat mechanics, right? Let their summoning have some narration to it too. Some of the world building aspect of how can they contribute to this world building? Are these creatures rare? Are they feared? Are they commonplace in this world? And what does that do to them? So that's like, a small consideration of what I'm going to think about. Then I'm going to get to the mechanics part of this, and that's kind of what we talked about. How are first of all, power levels, how are they going to align with the party's power level? Typically, that's on a chart, and they're going to be way less powerful. I remember we have a guy named Brandon in our group, and when he first started playing something that could summon things, he was so excited. We're fighting this like, gigantic worm or whatever, and he's like, I summon a dolphin, and it's like, this dolphin's not going to be able to hit this. He didn't, he was just excited to be able to summon some dolphins, and they would go in and they would like try to hit and they could never hit, or they would just get killed immediately. And he began to realize, oh yeah, so these summoned creatures are, I remember when he would summon like a tiger, and in our mind, if we would be out in the woods and we saw a tiger right now, that would be very scary. But in some of these, you're fighting, some, I'm trying to think of some great monster. I can't even think of one. A dragon, obviously. A tiger is like nothing, It's like a tiger jumps up and tries to do, it's got claw, bite. But those claw bites do like a DA each, or 2D6 or something, whatever. And you get this massive dragon with scales and all this.
Right.
And you quickly realize, okay, the power difference. But then I would also mechanically, I would have them, you have to decide. And maybe it's part of the way they play, but how's the control going to happen? Is this like you have to give a direct command every time to this person?
Right.
Are they an independent AI? You give them a task, you do this, and they're going to like then on their turn every time act and do what they need to do. Are they instinct driven, or do they only do what you have kind of mentally commanded them to do each time? And if there's a mental command in there, what does that mean for you, the rest of your action, You kind of have to establish some boundaries. And some of that, again, is going to be established by your rule systems. Some rule systems are going to have that really spelled out. Some aren't. And you have to, think, how's this going to work in the campaign? And then, as far as like initiative and actions, the last thing mechanically that I always want to think about is, how am I going to place all of these things? If it's one other thing, or if it's 4 other things, is it they all happen on your turn?
Right.
Am I going to give them all their own space in the initiative? So when it's low level, typically it's all on your turn. Okay. On your turn, your 3 dolphins are going to make their action also. Okay. But as you get more and more powerful, and you can summon more and more powerful things, you might summon, an intelligent creature that is kind of powerful, less powerful than your party, but it may be something that could then have its own place in the initiative and be doing stuff, especially if it's just one other. So like right now, you, in your campaign, you have somebody who has a sword that can call, who is it? It's a
Kaliana,
and she's something. She's intelligent. She can fight.
Elf spirit,
Yeah, she has spells, all this kind of stuff. Does that happen just on his turn?
That's part of this situation, to talk through. That's how we've been doing that. Yeah, we partially for speed, but I have things to say today that may counteract what I've been doing.
Right. Yeah. And so there's that whole thing of how much do they act independently, and how much are they just tied to like your NPC? And then, like we said, what does that do to their turn? So that's going to be some of my consideration as I'm thinking this through. And then, well, first of all, you said you might have some stuff to say about that. What is that you might have to
Yeah.
say about that?
Well, with that kind of, oh, man, yeah, considering like where I feel like a lot of stuff for me coming into thinking about summoning is about like there's tensions, and I'm just gonna throw out like I don't know that it's like this is the only, or it's definitely not the only, this or this is the best. I think there's flex there, so that's a hard thing to come at this with. But the initiative thing, I really like what you're talking about in terms of from just like a, I don't know if that's story, but like, okay, if I've summoned, a bunch of these like fairly mindless need direction type things, maybe not mindless, but they need direction, all the go with all the mosquitoes. I need to direct
Hmm.
them in a certain way. That could be part of my turn where I'm sending them versus like this elf spirit that can pop out of the sword who has her own mind. She could maybe be on a different turn, but I do wonder because so like Evan talked about in the chat here, he said time between turns is a definite factor to consider. The more beings in combat making choices and resolving actions lengthens the combat round. So we see
Right.
that with if you have 2 players versus 7 players, like you're going to see that, and then it's like more bodies. If you're a GM and you throw 50 enemies at the party, which I've done before and then regret it immediately, it's like that's going to take forever. You need to figure out a way to do that. Um, but all that being said, like I think for like a player to think, there's a lot of factors, and I think like the defining of like what are you wanting to do with this with the player is like an important conversation to have. If I have a player who's like, I want to be a summoner, like that is the shtick, like that's what I'm doing. That may be a little bit different than the person who's like, I really want to do this other stuff, but summoning is in my bag also. I may not go as
Right.
deep with that, but I want to like define like, okay, what is it you're wanting to do? Because you may have somebody who's really strategic and they're like, I want to be able to move around and move these people into different places. Like flanking is a thing, like where it's like, well, maybe I doubt that the summoner typically is going to flank, but druids get weird where it's like, I summon and then I wild shape and now we attack together. And it's like, there's some strategic things that you don't want to take away from your players. But I'm leaning more, even though 2 sessions ago for us was not the practice, to thinking in terms of like another initiative. And the reason for that is giving the player time to think, where it's like, okay, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And then I have a few rounds, maybe not to rounds, turns to like consider how do I actually want to move these people instead of having to decide like, okay, I need to figure out what 3 people are doing in this 6-second period.
Right.
Though, like, I think Chris did a really good job with that. Having that elf spirit and the angel that came down because he did the divine whatever, like prayed and it happened to like work.
Yeah.
Kind of think it was like, wow, we got a lot of stuff going on, but he did a great job. But I think like spacing that out does help the player and can give room, for like it to move a little quicker. So that's kind of the thought process. Practice so far has not been what I'm saying, but I want to move forward in that realm because I think it would help the speed of things.
Yeah. And then I think one thing that I like to do, and this probably goes back to me just loving to play lots of characters, but not just making it. So I think the assumption is I summon them, they do whatever I want.
Hmm.
And we've had this conversation before. When you summon someone, are you really just pulling them from like a life that they're in, that they're like a
Right.
real person or a real, part of a society somewhere, even if it's like
Yeah.
troll society, and you
Right.
just yank one of them out? Does that just mean they're just going to do whatever you want? And so
Right.
I love the idea of giving them some personality, some intelligence, some opportunity for role play, even if, you know, ultimately they're going to kind of do your will. That doesn't mean they're just going to be like, too often they're just treated as like turrets. I
Yeah.
throw them
Right.
down, they're a turret, they shoot, they hit, they
Right.
walk over here, they hit,
Yeah.
whatever. But
Fodder.
like, what if instead they're they have some, whether it's they're like, jolly good, mate. Good to see you here. I can't believe you pulled me of all the people that are going to be here, and I get to be the one. So what is it you want me to do? And so here we go, whatever. Or, if they're kind of resentful that you pulled them in the first place and they don't want to be doing this, but they kind of have to because of your summon ability is, and what does that look like? And so that whole idea of giving them some intelligence. Now, again, this is where it's like, not always do I want it to happen in battle, which is, I think, 98% of when summoners decide to summon something. So the other thing is, what happens when they're dismissed? Let's say they summon like a same character over and over again. Does that person then begin to feel like, I'm special to them, I'm part of this party, and every time they're dismissed, they're dejected and they feel like abandoned,
right?
and then they get pulled back and they're like, why did you send me off last time? Did I not do well? And they become almost needy and codependent, and to the point that this person then has to like do some consoling every time they summon this. There's stuff you can do, but it's hard when it's just like, first round of battle, I summon 3 creatures and they're going to fight. Well, what happens if they summon and instead of, what about this? What if the more you summon that kind of creature, they're all in a community somewhere. They all know that randomly they get pulled by this guy and then they get dumped back in. Sometimes they don't get dumped back in because they've died, and sometimes they get dumped back in like hurt, and they have to be nursed back to health. And so every time you summon the same kind of creature, they're coming from the same place and they're more and more hostile every time. And so every time there's this thing you have to roll that determines how hostile they are toward you and how much they're going to like do what you say, or, those kinds of things I think could make it very interesting. And so you have to start thinking about like, how do I treat these things that I summon? If you're considerate, if you summon them, but then before, you make sure to heal them. And before you send them back, you make sure they're fully healed. You thank them, whatever, then maybe they don't come back as hostile. But if you just treat them as the objects, right? You're just a thing here for my pleasure and joy, and then you're gone. Then maybe it's going to get harder and harder for you the more you go. So I would love doing stuff like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting like example of that, and it's not quite the same raw, at least like rules is written stuff or whatever for D&D, but the I guess it's all the way through, but like Drizzt and was it Guinevere, the Black Panther,
right?
In there, there's some interesting stuff with that where, because that's like one of those like obsidian statuette things that you can, so it's the same, but it's different because that's very specifically like, this is a specific creature that always comes back. It's the same one. Whereas like what we're talking about here is like not necessarily in the rules, whatever, but like, I think that's a cool way to move that. So, but in those stories, you have to read like 12 books to get it. But like the person before who owned it before used Guinevere as basically like, this is just a weapon in my arsenal, and I don't care, I'm just using her, kind of thing. Versus the way Drizzt ends up having, it's the ranger in him, but he has this like more connection. They're connected. It's like he cares about the, and if she's getting hurt, we'll dismiss her out to like heal, like there and stuff. And I think that's like that is an interesting piece of storytelling that, like, if you're a player out there wanting to be in that summoner kind of idea, like that's a cool bent. I guess you could take the route of like, I don't care, and that's my bent also, kind of thing. But that's a different type of situation. But I like that I my favorite joke, I think I did a one shot one time that the PCs were people who got pulled in as summoned creatures. And something went, I messed with way magic works, and they didn't get to leave basically after it was over because something had went haywire. But that was like a funny joke within that, because I do think it's funny to think about like, where do these people come from, and
Mm-hmm.
how they're like, this is real life. And I love the idea that, somebody's like, well, Jimmy got pulled out the other day and came back and he wasn't quite the same afterwards. Hopefully it's not my turn next. Like,
Right.
but yeah, I think those things are good. Some things that like maybe I've been thinking about with help with people moving forward. One thing I'll call out Sam Grant. In a game that I play with him like once a month. We have a druid, and again, this is a different reason that he does this, but the druid Sam has like, as the GM, these like laminated cards. I think you can just buy them from D&D, but it's the stats for any animal that the druid could turn into.
Mm-hmm.
And when the druid has come across those animals and can like understand how they work and turn into one, a new card gets given to that player to like put in the stack of like, here's the options I have for like wild shape is what that section's going. And I think that like one, that's like super cool. And I've appreciated that, because you don't have that moment of, I mean, even if you got the book in front of you, there's that moment of like, we're trying to flip. It's like, no, I fan out my cards and one of these 12, here it is. I'm ready to go. I think that could be a good use for like a summoner, if they're like regularly doing that, of having those stats available for them, encouraging them to have those stats available, if not giving them outright to them, because that's like a huge part of that slowdown, even the time between turns. It's like, we're flipping through all this stuff, we're trying to look up online. That can help a ton. So just an encouragement, for anybody out there with a summoner in your party, that's a good way to go about it, is like to have those things ready so that they can move forward too. So that's like one like kind of practical piece there.
And I think, I talked about like them having a personality. What you don't want to do is every single time on their turn, they have to say something and there's this contest of wills or whatever, that would make things take way too long. If you're going to give them some personality and try to get more narrative into this, the narrative happens like when the summon happens, maybe once if something big happens in the battle, but most of the time they're just kind of doing their thing. And then when they're dismissed or killed, what does that do? And so I think it can be really cool. Again, you want to keep your summoner from just, feeling like I summon and now they fight. So that whole idea of maybe they have that stack of creatures that they can summon, or if it's the wild shape they can turn into, get them to have some sort of ritual for each of those different animals. Right. And so like they get to describe the summoning ritual that can involve specific components and incantations or whatever, as they bring up the monkey versus the bird,
right.
So that almost people, without knowing, instead of saying I summon a monkey, they can say I jump up and beat my chest 3 times as I scratch my head, and suddenly a gigantic, ape or gorillion pops up in front of me.
Yeah.
Let them have some fun with that.
Right, yeah.
And then also the idea that maybe there's such a thing as a failed ritual or unpredictable creatures that come through, and what might that look like? And it doesn't happen very often. Maybe you roll behind the screen a D100, and if it happens to hit 98, 99, or 100, then it's going to like be an uncontrollable summoned gorillion that will attack whatever and whoever, and they can still dismiss it, but they have to, they have to recognize that it's, fighting their companion, and then dismiss. Maybe that's something you would do as a GM. Maybe you're not that vengeful like me. I might have some fun stuff like that. I would also maybe have some material cost, like it's going to take some resources or some of their energy or some components to summon the powerful creatures. Not all of them. Man, if they're doing like mosquitoes or dolphins, who cares? But when, they get up to do the Balrog, in order to do that, it's going to take something from them that has a cost to it.
Yeah. 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 I think that's interesting. You're talking about those smaller creatures, and it's like I'm visuals are like really important to me today for some reason. But the like a good, if they're doing smaller creatures, something that anybody watching, a good example of like ways to use things could be like the movie Ant-Man. Is like the way, specifically that first movie, he uses a bunch of different types of ants in different ways. Like there's the flyer, he jumps on and flies around and does, it's like, but the way he communicates, I think it's another one of those things of like, he actually cares about these creatures, even though there's like a bajillion of them. And it'd be super easy to like, he keeps naming them and all this stuff. And I think that's like a way to like consider summoning, like to like put it through that filter of, I actually care about what's going on here. And they're not just fodder, they're not just turrets, they're not just that. But a lot of this stuff is like just that like encouragement to flavor things too, of like, I love that idea of when they come in. And there's a lot of that stuff too, where it's like, it just makes it more rich when it's not just like, I want to do this. It's there. Okay. 15 to hit. It's like, no, what does this actually look like from a player standpoint, from a GM standpoint, story wise, to like look through that. So I like that a lot. Another, like, I don't know, what do you think about like rolling ahead? If we're going to get into like, okay, we're in a combat, you have 7 muskrats that are attacking the orc, I think that could be a help too. I want to trust my players to be like, you can handle this. And, just say, I rolled the 7 things, I hit 3 times.
Move on, especially when it's small stuff. Obviously, if you get up to 1 intelligent creature, I like maybe that to happen more in the moment. But yeah, anytime it's like, very unintelligent, unaware, small, multiple, those sorts of things. Yeah, roll it up, have it ready with results so it doesn't slow down the combat at all.
I think that's a good
one thing I was thinking in there as you were talking is I think as a DM or a GM, you could you could use, especially if they're the kind of person who continues to summon the same thing to every battle. You could make it so that those summoned creatures begin to have some effective plot device to them, right? So maybe they begin to reveal some knowledge about an ancient event right at the end of their summoning, and then just as they're in the middle of it, they go away because their summon duration has gone away. They begin to tell you about like some stuff that basically is going to lead you into more knowledge of what's going on in the story. These summoned creatures, but you don't always get the same summoned creature. So maybe they quickly resummon and they get a different one, and he doesn't have that knowledge. But maybe every 4th time that same one comes back and he gives you some more interesting knowledge. Or maybe you summon something and it's actually something that is being pursued by a different faction in the world. And they recognize that there's one there and they're after it because of that. Now they're involved in this story too. You can bring in a faction, based on this guy always summons, a cave troll.
Yeah, right.
There's this other faction that hates all cave trolls, and they start following you because they somehow realize that there's always cave trolls around you. Yeah. So I don't know. That could be fun, just as a GM. But what I would do is always really kind of press my players to be creative with what they're doing, right? With their summon creatures. Encourage them to use them in unexpected ways instead of just combat. Think about like how they can do other things that might be interesting for your party, like breaking in or gathering information or, whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about...
Do what they can without bogging down the gameplay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, there's like really cool places for that. I keep bringing up wild shape in this too, and you talk about that in a different thing, but like that's a thing that I played a druid for a handful of sessions, and I got to the point where I loved wild shape, not for like, oh, I'm going to turn into this massive thing in battle, but it was, I'm going to turn into a fly and fly around this ballroom and listen in on all the people
Do all the
gossiping.
stealth
You know, like it's like
info
that's the,
gathering. Yeah.
that's the stuff that
If
I'm
I
like,
could be a fly on the wall, would
yeah.
you fan be?
I loved, I loved that aspect of, using things not for power, but for like stealth or skill or like those kind of things just to get places. It was pretty interesting. I do think like the use of that for summon creatures too is pretty neat. And if you can, a lot of summoners are probably going to have a chance, an ability to communicate in some way, with like what they've done. So there's that option of like, okay, yeah, I'm going to send them out for scouting and I'm going to do these things. I like that a lot. What do you think about, like from your experience, your forces? So like as the GM, I have these hostile forces in a combat. Like, have you used summoning in that realm? Because I think that puts a different kind of spin on the combat if like the enemies start summoning things.
Yeah, and I think we've probably all as GMs done that, where you're fighting some mage and then he like, and this thing is like there, it's huge and it's fighting them. Too often, I think we do the same thing. We just use it as a turret or as a damage,
right.
and we without thinking of the actual intelligence or role that they may be. So I haven't done that stuff for myself. The intelligence and role playing aspect. I do just what I'm claiming players do, and that is just use it as like a stat. And I think it could be fun to what could be really cool is, let's say you always summon a cave troll, like the player, and then they're fighting cave trolls, and you summon a cave troll, and like what happens in that group. Or let's say you're the villain and you summon something that would be sympathetic toward your players, and it's supposed to fight and then it doesn't or something.
Yeah. Or it's become friendly with the players, but now has to fight them because it's under the control. Like that'd be an interesting piece too, especially if you have a player who's getting more. It's not just like, Antelope X appears. It's like, no, this is Bartholomew, who I summon every single time and who has helped me out through many adventures, kind of thing. And then suddenly has to fight against that.
Evan just said necromancers popularly summon skeletons that don't mind waiting in the battle. But
sure.
What if it was the skeleton of like one of your relatives? And you recognized it. They're wearing like the necklace you put on grandma. You're like standing there. You're like, should I knock this skeleton down? That's definitely grandma. She's still got the hair, the wig we put on her, and the necklace.
I love the. I can't remember the exact terms, but it's like, it's like my brother was killed by orcs. I need your help. And he's like, you have my axe. Or like the warrior's like, you have my axe. And the ranger's like, you have my bow. And the necromancer's like, and your brother. I don't love that. It's messed up, but it's funny. I think like going back to the summoned, like as the GM summoning from like an enemy, that's kind of sometimes like on a practical level, I think it can be similar to okay, this battle really needs to be harder than it is, like right now. And the group of soldiers in the other room heard the fight, so they're running through the door now, and like, 3 soldiers come in. I think like the summons sometimes gets used in that way too. And that's a fair point of like, let's up the ante of this thing. It's not just like, oh, I screwed up on the challenge rating, but it's like, no, like this is part of the drama of this fight, is not just, oh, here are the 5.
You think you have him almost dead.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's like a good use of that, of the wizard summoning the, the Baylor, and it like, it has to, now this is like hardcore suddenly. Um, but yeah, I think like having some of that, taking our own medicine here of like, yeah, what if it, there's a conversation that takes place, even if it's like the creature questioning, like, why have you summoned me? And the, wizard's like, you're bound to me. This is what you need. That like happens in this moment kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You get to see a little bit more story, which is kind of a cool piece. Or even the creatures, whether it's the PCs or the like GM forces, but it's like, I've fulfilled my duty before they're like, kind of back. Evan's saying named villains might summon critters to run interference for them to try to make an escape. Yeah. Like I like that idea of like just defensive measures in a lot of ways too, to be able to do that. Like there's nothing like summoning something huge and then running out the door and having the PCs have to deal with it. So yeah, yep. It's a good use.
So I think when you boil it all down, when I'm talking about how do you deal with summoned creatures in a game, I think it's do every attempt to add role playing to the mechanic. Understand how to control the mechanic so it doesn't bog down your table and make everything slow, and but then also at the same time, and I know this is a balance because it can make it slow when you get too much role playing that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But how do you like let that person really feel, what would it be like to be a summoner? And I summon some things that are not completely brain dead.
Yeah.
And how do I do that? And what does it look
Right.
like? And how do I have those conversations? What's it like when I dismiss them? What happens if I, am fighting for the Holy Church and I keep, summoning vampires and things that they hate,
Yeah. How does it affect that? Yeah.
Could this, the things I summon, bring favor from certain groups?
Right.
That,
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So
Yeah.
it's all about like thinking again as the GM, how can I like put twists in this story because of who my characters are, because they're the main thing. You really want them to shine. It's not about you shining, but it's about like, how can you take the things they're doing and make it like even more? And just like with everything else, I think that's one of your goals with a summoner in particular.
For sure. Yeah, that's good. Cool.
Any more about summoners and summoned things?
I feel like things may come into the next time we talk. Yeah, I have like stuff rallying around in my brain about the tension between the flow of like the speed of a combat. I'm thinking very combat oriented right now, but like the speed and flow of a combat and like autonomy of the like the control of the player, like them having control over their stuff. And I'll probably talk about that more with like the cohorts and animal companions and stuff, but making sure like to find that good balance of these are both important, so how do we do that? But I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about here is pushing into that idea of like, I want to come into this and be like if I have a summoner at my table, which I don't feel like I've had that fully, so I haven't even got to experience it to the full depth of someone who's like, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is what I want to do. But like allowing it to be fun, because like we all know what it's like to even, you go up and throw a spell or fire a firearm or shoot your bow or whatever, and you like miss. And it's like,
yeah.
Oh, next person, kind of thing. And to have that like as a thing too, where it's like, I summon all these mosquitoes and they all miss. And, like I think of this other stuff about the narrative and helping things flow faster makes it just more fun and more able to like be exciting for the person doing it rather than gone. But I think some of that's going to come into the next episode also. So,
yeah.
Yep. So I think that's what I have to say.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's move on to our NPC of the day. Our NPC today is Lana the Peacebringer.
Mm.
She is deluded, by the way. She is a crime lord who has deluded herself into thinking she's more than she is. Her appearance, she's tall, buxom, with brilliant red hair and emerald green eyes, ivory skin, complemented by a fur cloak and bronze armor. She carries a matching bronze spear. So everything about her looks very noble, right? She speaks kindly to people until they dare question her. And when confronted, she'll verbally or physically assault her perceived adversary. Lana is warm with words, but cold in her actions. She promises to lead people to a better life, but is oblivious to how she hurts other people. She has no tolerance for anyone who opposes her or her organization. The motivation she has is that she's a crime lord with these delusions of grandeur, right? She wants love from those she protects. And if they don't love her, she'll kill them. I mean, it's that quick of a flip, right? And here's why. Lana's father was a notorious crime lord who wanted better for her in her life, a more honest life for her. And so he sent her to the finest academies where she excelled in all subjects. But then upon returning home, she learned that her father had been assassinated by a rival. And with her father's passion and knowledge afforded by her schooling, Lana easily took control of the crime organization and eliminated all her competitors. In her mind, she delivered peace, right? That's what she thought she was doing in all this violence. She's delivering peace. She realized there were many territories that needed, quote, protection, right? And so, fooled by her own lies, she and what she began as revenge continued as for profit and becoming this self-righteous crusade. And now she sees herself as this person who is kind and loving, but she does it with an iron fist and she's ready to kill anybody. And anybody who like doesn't appreciate what she does, it's like the switch is flipped and quickly she becomes like this violent person who will kill anyone, right?
Yeah.
And so that's our deluded crime lord who thinks that she's somehow doing great things, but really it's all for selfish ends, and it's like very violent. That's Lana the Peacebringer.
Yeah.
Could you use Lana in any way in a campaign you're in?
Yes.
Yes.
I like her. I'm a fan. There's some like there's some specific things about the way they wrote this, but here's what I want to do with Lana. I want Lana to be a childhood friend of one of the PCs. I want all of this to be fresh. Like, this is not, she's been doing this for 15 years. I want this to be like the last 6 months. She has been on tilt because she got back, her father got killed, and she's went down this path. And I want this to be a story arc where I want the end thing, which again, you can't force this, but like in my brain, the big moment is this point where she is like about to do something terrible and they're able to talk her off the ledge, or, like there's some sort of almost like Batman gone bad in a lot of ways, kind of thing. It's like, this all happened. You could have went down a different way, and but then the end being able to do that. Like I can see that arc. I think that would be a really fun way to tie in a character. So, for me, if I'm going to do that, I'm looking at, one of these characters who's like, yeah, and I had this friend, and it doesn't have to be Lana, but it's like, I had this friend growing up, and then it's like, well, that person is now this person, and this is the story that's going on. So that's how I would use it. I like that a lot more than just like, oh, there's this random person who does a lot of bad stuff. You kind of interact with them, kind of deal. I love. Go ahead.
And it could be like she or they, whoever you make it to be, they really do see themselves as, man, there's too much violence, all these different factions out there. So we need to kill them and get them out of the way so that there is peace. And it's like not even hearing what you're saying. I'm going to kill all of these people to bring peace. And I want you guys to help me. And so then that puts some moral implications and twists on your PCs, as it's a friend, it's somebody you care about. Their ultimate goal is they want peace for the city. But the way they're going about it is completely violent.
Right. Yeah.
What do you do?
Yep. For sure. Yeah. Evan said, I dig peace through any means, antagonists. their stated goals are understandable, but their methods are extremely disruptive. Yeah. It's like the Ultron peace in our time kind of, situations like, well, actually what you mean is destroying everything. And in some ways, like that's I always wonder, I think it's been, that's kind of the idea of like the antagonist, the main antagonist in like my game right now is like, yeah, like if we just basically made everything like an undead land, like the whole world, then everything would be fine because there'd be peace, right? Like they wouldn't have any agenda. And it's like, nah, it's probably not a good idea, kind of thing. So
not good.
That's happening a little bit, but I like, even like from the writing standpoint, and I think it's like one of those for our NPCs that you like make on your own, your homebrewing people. I love that line about like warm words and cold actions. Like, I think that's like a really good way to like, it's like you immediately know how that person's going to play out.
Yeah.
Like you can play within that. And so if you're making an NPC out there, like maybe that's a filter to like put things, not saying like warm words, cold actions every time, or cold words, warm actions, or maybe there is a quadrant, but like being able to put some sort of adjective on those things of like, how does this person speak? How does this person act? And like, you're in a pretty good spot to like play that person out if you just have like those two things, in
it's
general.
that idea of you understand the motivation and the how.
Right.
And then you don't have to know a script of how this is going to go. You just become that person. And you're like, okay, if I'm that person in this situation and this comes up, here's how I would react.
Yeah.
And you go.
Yep, exactly. So I liked that a lot, just from like thinking about building NPCs kind of thing. And I do like, this goes with the motivation thing, but I can't remember if this is actually from, it may have just been my words, but she has this like quote, glorious purpose based in her history. It's like, there's something that happened in her history that's causing this. And that's another thing, is if like, maybe we know this little snippet of this was a thing that happened to this person or near this person or because of this person. And this is now what they're doing because of it, how they've reacted. That's another, like, the why of why they do what they do kind of thing. So I liked that about her, just from it felt like it helped me even like think about other NPCs the way that she was written. So I liked that a lot with Lana.
There you go. Lana, the deluded crime lord.
Some would say misunderstood.
Some would say that. Some would be wrong. All right. Well, hey, I think we have no haversack questions for today. No. And we are off next week. So we just want to remind everybody of that. So you're not sitting here waiting for us. We want you to have a good Thanksgiving. And hopefully the stuff we talked about today can help you with Summoners. Got a good idea for an NPC and maybe a good mutated monstrous encounter from it. So for us, that's it. You guys have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you the week after, where we're going to talk about familiars and those sorts of things.
Animal companions, cohorts, and familiars.
All right. All that next time right here on Rise of the GM. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Let's go.
Bye now.